A Dragon Named Goose, Chapter 12, Part 1. In the moon's faint glow, the silhouettes of men darted along the dock, a good 50 meters away. Glints of metal shone in their hands. One by one, Darius disabled the layers in his auric shield and all the entwining patterns and functions hidden within. The boy had taken so much energy out of him that he had to preserve what little was left. Ebba lay at his side, ever vigilant, panting as she tracked the men with her ice-like stare. "Ebba, listen," he said to his wolf. Her sharp ears tilted up and forward, her ears, his eyes. Focusing, he channeled his remaining energy into his third eye chakra and projected it through his vision. A mana construct in his aura would have a better effect, but he did not have the mental energy left to conjure. With a dizzying rush, the men along the dock came into clear view. They were spiritless, dirty men in tattered brown garb, large Novian muskets in hand, dangerous weapons at close range, but slow to reload. Daggers hung from their waists, next to small trinkets, with the glow of stored spirit energy. Novians would never be caught alive using magic devices, and rarely ventured as far as Aria. That left only one possibility: pirates. And there was no sign of Raxus, as if Darius should expect more from a backstabbing North Vivian. "Dak!" The large boy and his grandfather stopped in their tracks, a large fish flopping out from Dak's grip as they stood ankle-deep in the swells. "Take the boy and Goose and get inside the shack. Do not exit until I tell you to do so." "But now!" Darius's tone and hard stare left no room for questions. Dak picked up Garen from the floor as if he were a doll and headed towards the shack, his grandfather scooping up Goose as he trudged behind, Aegis bringing up the rear. Darius ushered Ebba into a dark crevice under the wooden stilts and unsheathed his dagger. On the dock, the pirates stopped behind roughly stacked barrels and netting. Through Ebba, he heard their whispering. "Can't miss this chance, lads." "Are you sure, boss?" "Corsair said just to watch and wait for Cam. He'll be angry." "You numbskull, angry. Grimthorn will shower us with ambies if we bring back the boy and his dragon. Think of all the women and wine you'll get. Who cares about Lord Corsair?" The men giggled together like a pack of hyenas, the fattest of them whistling with each chuckle through a gap in his teeth. None of them noticed the large shadow rising from the water behind them. Darius shivered. Serpus. As soon as the dripping shadow fully materialized, slanted eyes and two fangs gleaming under its flared hood, it plunged down upon them. The monstrous snake crashed through the wooden boards, swallowing the lead pirate whole. The remaining two scrambled back from the shattered wood, one heading for the boat, the other down to the dock to Kern Bay, anywhere but the thrashing waters under them. But the figure suddenly appearing at the entrance to the dock gave the fleeing man pause. He was extremely slim and perfectly bald, wearing a skin-tight black suit that shimmered like wet leather. He walked slowly, his body moving as if there were hardly a bone to it. Down one side of his face were rough gray patches of what seemed to be scales, and the eye on that side was yellow, the pupil but a narrow slit. Darius's breath caught in his chest. Physical corruption? Of a sorcerer elite? A new low, even for Raxus. The pirate raised his shaking musket, but the dock suddenly heaved, and it dropped from his grip as he fell. And then he froze. Serpus, seemingly finished with his leader, coiled around the dock, eyeing the man as if a tasty meal. Then the snake's head began to sway, its eyes opening wider. The pirate's breathing slowed, and the look of terror dropped from his face. He barely blinked as Serpus slowly opened his jaws and swallowed him whole. Darius gulped. "Raxus, what have you done?" he whispered. The last remaining and portly pirate was desperately untying the mooring lines to his boat. Into a device on his sleeve, he shouted, "There's bloody 2 of them! 2!" Seeing the approaching snake, he raised his musket and fired, the sound almost lost in the cacophony of fireworks at the festival in the distance. Serpus dematerialized a section of his body as the shell hit and instantly reformed. Not skipping a beat, the snake's tail coiled around the pirate. The man lifted from the boat and onto the dock. Serpus raised his head, opening his jaws wide. "Serpus, wait!" came a hiss of a voice. Raxus. Darius hadn't seen him move, as if he had stepped from shadow. "Now, let us make this quick," he said, eyeing the man. "Tell me who sent you, and maybe you will live." "Nobody," the man spluttered as the tail came away from his mouth. "Just raiding the docks to take our loot back to Tooth. The tail tightened around his throat. "Do not try me. Serpus is so very hungry, and my patience is waning." The huge snake hissed as it came next to Raxus, yellow eyes fixed on the man. The pirate gulped, his neck straining against the scaled skin of the serpent. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Just keep that thing away from me." With a thud, he hit the deck, coughing and feeling at his throat. After a few moments, he stood, gaze flicking between his boat and the serpent. Raxus crossed his arms. "Now, let's try this again. Who sent you and why?" "A dragon named Goose." Chapter 12, Part 2. The man suddenly went very still, the only movement the throb of a large vein across his forehead. As if pulled back by an unseen force, his eyes rolled up into the back of his head. Then he fell, hitting the deck hard, and lay still. Raxus's head tilted as he looked at the form and then turned, casting an eye over the area as if searching, and for a moment landed on directly where Darius lay hidden. But there was no one else. Raxus waved his hand, and Serpus devoured the corpse. Jumping on the back of the snake, they both plunged into the water, speeding towards Darius's location. Darius walked out from under the stilts, his legs still weak, his dagger behind his back. One danger was over, and another was coming. Fast, both on land and in water, Serpus was soon zigzagging through the shore and sand towards him, sticking to shadows where possible. Raxus deftly leaped off as they neared, landing only a few paces away. His snake, so much larger than Darius remembered, perhaps 10 meters long, waited behind him, its yellow and green belly distended and eyes fixed on Ebba. The wolf's hackles were up, but she stayed behind Darius. Ebba wasn't scared of many things, but Serpus, well, there was history between them. History that was no easier for Darius. "Darius, my friend, it's been a while," Raxus said, his voice now devoid of the hiss, but still coarse. No scales were to be seen along the man's face, and his eyes were a soft shade of brown. Had Darius imagined the corruption? The smirk Raxus held still seemed unnaturally wide, and all too similar to Serpus. Even the man's suit made Darius shiver. It was not leather, but scales and sheddings layered thickly onto his skin. "Serpus consumed those men, Raxus," Darius began, holding his voice steady. "By the laws, I will have to report this. You risk corruption." Raxus laughed. "You will do no such thing." Darius raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" Raxus pointed toward the shack, the smile still etched on his face. "The spiritless bastard was in no danger of death, but the same can't be said for Garen. You were reckless, a grand dereliction of duty." Raxus's smile was gone, and the narrow slits of his eyes peered at Darius. "Or perhaps your senses weren't able to discern as much? Maybe I think too much of you." Darius clenched his fists. "I did what needed to be done, Raxus. The boy must be strong if he is to survive." "Oh, you Locks are all the same. Strength and honor when it suits you. It will be your downfall." Raxus licked his lips. "As it was your brother's." Ebba lurched forward from behind Darius, but he managed to grab her by the mane to hold her back. It took every bit of will he had. "Never speak of my brother, Raxus. Not if you want to live." Raxus laughed, Serpus hissing behind him. "I don't think you are in any state to make such demands, old friend. now more than ever. Darius swallowed down the bile in his throat. He hated this man more than any other, but he was right. To report Raxus would be to reveal his own misconduct, and not many would understand his reasoning. Making his face calm and expressionless, he nodded and spoke again. "We have nothing to search now. Those men are gone." "Darius, my dear fool, you believe those men would wear their allegiances on their sleeves?" Raxus held his belly as he laughed. "Not even pirates are that stupid. But if you must, Serpus." The snake slithered between them and with a heave vomited. Dirty clothes, Novian muskets, spirit energy-infused trinkets, and boots fell from the snake's mouth, covered in a light green ooze. There was no flesh or bone. "Feel free to look through these for any clues." Raxus smirked. Truly, a task befitting a dog. The stink was almost unbearable, and even as Darius watched, bits of the ooze were starting to melt through even the muskets. The more intriguing matter at hand, Raxus continued, still peering around the high reaches of Kern Bay and the cliffs above, is who killed the last of them. It was not I, but I felt a sharp sense of powerful magic, if only for a second. He looked at Darius, biting his lip, not wanting to ask. "I thought it was you." Darius kept his stare level on the man. Raxus's sense for magic was, as much as Darius wanted to admit, far beyond his level. "Then someone very powerful is at play here." The sick smile returned. "And I thought this mission was going to be boring." Not waiting for a reply, Raxus mounted Serpus. "Now, as much as I love talking with you, old friend, I'm afraid I must go. Serpus is still hungry, and I'm sure some drunken spiritless are just waiting to go missing as they return from the festival." Darius clenched his teeth, but before he could reply, Raxus's howl of a laugh stopped him. "Oh, you should see your face right now, Darius. I jest. And with that, Raxus sped off, slithering over the sand, his mad laughing fading as they disappeared from view. Darius let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He would need to tread carefully with Raxus, even more so if other players were involved. And just who were Grimthorn, Corsair, and Cam? Who had killed the last pirate? He had much to investigate. The questions swirling in his mind were disturbed as Ebba growled low in her throat, a hint of a whine at the end of each deep sound. She was still looking to where Raxus had gone. He could feel her pain and knew what she was thinking. He gently petted her mane. "I know, Ebba. I know." One day they would get their revenge. One day they would kill Raxus.